palace war room was tense. Message came in with sharp urgency. Elias's team was surrounded. Enemy forces closed in fast. A traitor had leaked their location. Queen Varelia stood silent for a moment. Her eyes scanned the maps, the blinking. Red dots closing in on Elias's position. She clenched her fists. This was the moment of truth. Could she abandon Elias and save what was left of her people? Or trust the human who had changed everything and risk it all? Varelia's voice rang out, clear and strong. We follow Elisa's plan no matter what. Every available soldier, every resource, every moment. We fight as one. Her commanders nodded, some reluctantly, others with fierce determination. Outside, the city was alive with preparations. Soldiers readied weapons. Engineers armed drones. Civilians helped build defenses. The war was coming to its final chapter. Meanwhile, Elisa's team held their ground deep inside the enemy's territory, surrounded but not broken. They fought with every ounce of skill and courage. Elias's right arm throbbed with pain, but his mind was sharp. He directed his fighters, moving them to better positions, setting traps, calling for reinforcements. One of his scouts returned with news. The queen was sending help. Relief washed over the team. But Elias warned, we can't rely on rescue. We must survive on our own until it arrives. Far from the front lines, Varelia led a massive strike force through the ruined streets. Her armor glinted in the low sun. Her wings spread wide as she flew ahead. Her voice was heard on every channel. Hold the line. Support Elias. Show the Gorthons the spirit of Ixer. The people responded. Fighters and civilians united as one. Back. At the trap, the Gorthon forces pushed harder. Their weapons fired with deadly precision. Elias watched as one of his closest comrades was hit. No, Elias shouted, rushing to help. He pulled the wounded fighter to safety. Keep fighting. He urged, we win or we die together. The team's spirit held strong. Then, sound of heavy engines filled the air. Reinforcements had arrived. Exari mechs and drone swarms poured into the battlefield, attacking the Gorthon flanks. The enemy was caught off guard. Elias seized the moment. Push forward. Now. The team fought back fiercely, gaining ground. At the center of the battle, Queen Varelia faced the Gorthon commander, Kryzzar. Their eyes locked. You cannot win, Kryzzar sneered. We already have, Varelia replied. They clashed in a fierce duel, sword against blade. Sparks flew as they struck. Varelia's strength was more than just skill. It was the will of her people behind her. Meanwhile, Elias saw Kryzzar's tank approach the front line. Varelia needs help. Elias shouted into his come. Without hesitation, Elias ran toward the tank, dodging fire. He pulled out a small device, an old earth weapon, magnetic pulse grenade. He threw it carefully. The grenade stuck to the tank's armor and exploded with an electromagnetic blast. The tank's systems shut down instantly. Kryzzar's furious. Roar echoed as he was forced to flee. The Gorthons began to retreat in chaos. Queen Varelia called out, "This is our home. We will never surrender." Cheers erupted as the enemy withdrew. Days later, the war was over. The capital was scarred, but standing. The people of Ixer began to rebuild. Queen Varelia stood before a new monument. It showed two figures, side by side. A Exari queen and a human man. Underneath were the words, "Together, we are stronger." Elias stood beside her, quiet and humble. When asked why he stayed, Elias smiled. "I didn't come here to lead," he said. "Came to help." Varelia smiled back, "And you changed everything." The war had been won not by alien power or machines, but by courage, trust, and the unexpected strength of a human from the crowd. The ruins were silent after the great battle. Smoke still rose from the shattered towers, but the enemy machines had retreated. The first time in weeks, Ixer's people dared to breathe. Queen Varelia sat quietly in the palace war room. Her armor was cracked, her wings heavy with fatigue. Beside her stood Elias Rourke, the human who had changed the course of the war. But the danger was far from over. A sudden alarm shattered the silence. "Incoming message from Gorthon forces," announced a technician. Virelia's eyes narrowed. As the screen lit up with a holographic figure, it was General Krizar himself, smirking with cold hatred. "Queen Virelia," he said, voice dripping with menace. "Your tricks will not save you forever. Elias is a dangerous wildcard, but he will fall. Yeah, we'll see to it personally." The message ended with a cruel laugh. Virelia clenched her fists. "He's sending a strike team to kill Elias." Elias nodded grimly. "I expected nothing less." That night, a group of shadowy figures slipped into the city, cloaked and deadly. They moved like ghosts. Their mission: capture or kill Elias. Elias was resting when alarms blared. Strike team detected. "Prepare for defense," he said, rising quickly despite his bruises. Virelia arrived with a small squad. "We protect him at all costs." The strike team moved fast. Silent weapons and stealth drones attacked from all sides. Elias fought with fierce determination. Though injured, he used every trick he had learned on Earth and from Exari warriors. But the enemy was relentless. In the middle of the fight, a loyal Exari warrior named Kale stepped between Elias and a deadly blow. The strike hit Kale full force. He fell, breathing his last breath. Elias caught his friend's hand. "Kale, you didn't have to." Kale smiled weakly. "For you, for all of us." His eyes closed. Elias felt a surge of anger and sorrow. "We will not fail. Not now." The fight ended with the strike team retreating. Virelia knelt beside Kale's body. He was brave. "We owe him everything." She turned to Elias. "We cannot keep you safe in the palace forever. This war is changing us." Elias wiped the blood from his arm, "Then we must change with it." The next day, Virelia made a bold announcement. Elias was named official battle strategist for the Exar Empire. Some cheered. Many others scowled. Old generals whispered behind closed doors. "Human? We cannot trust him." But the queen stood firm. "We need unity. The enemy is not just outside our walls. It is inside our doubts." Elias began training Exari officers in new tactics, fast strikes, guerrilla warfare, and psychological tricks he had used on Earth. Slowly, distrust began to fade. Meanwhile, Elias pushed for a daring idea: to unite alien factions that had long hated each other. "Together, we are stronger," he said at a council meeting. Some laughed, others shouted, "Impossible." One leader barked, "The Zellerans would never fight alongside the Exari." "But the Gorthons will destroy us all if we stay divided," Elias replied. The debate raged late into the night. In a quiet moment, Virelia approached Elias. "Why do you believe in this?" He smiled tiredly. "Because I've seen what division brings. I've lost too much to let that happen again." She nodded slowly. "Then we will try. For all our sakes." As preparations began for the final battle, Elias led a small bait force into the enemy's territory. To his goal, draw the Gorthons into a trap. The night was cold and dark. Every sound echoed. Every shadow was a threat. Then the ambush began. Elias's team fought fiercely, but were soon surrounded. A traitor had leaked their location. Virelia received the news in the palace. Her face tightened. The moment of truth was here. She could follow Elias's full plan or abandon him to save herself. The people of Ixer looked up at the sky as the fire from space rained down. Chunks of the Gorthon command station burned like falling stars. Across the city, cheers rose as the enemy troops began pulling back. The Gorthon attack had stopped, but Queen Virelia did not cheer. She stood silently at the palace balcony, her sharp violet eyes staring at the sky. There was no message, no signal, no sign of Elias. He had gone into space, to the Gorthon station, to destroy their command. And he had succeeded, but at what cost? "Any word from the pod?" she asked quietly. Commander Ryvek shook his head. "Nothing." The last beacon signal vanished with the station. Virelia's wings folded tightly behind her. "He's gone." Silence fell around her. Then one voice spoke from behind. "Not yet." The queen turned sharply. From the shadows, limping and burned, Elias Rourke stepped into the light. His uniform was torn, his face bruised, and his right arm wrapped in makeshift cloth. But he was alive. Her breath caught in her throat. "You? How did you?" Elias gave a tired grin. "I found a Gorthan escape pod right before the core exploded. It was junk, but it flew." The Queen stepped closer. "You survived the blast?" "Barely. I crashed in the outer desert. Took me a while to walk back." Virelia stared at him, unsure what to say. So she did the one thing no one expected. She reached out and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "Thank you, Elias," she whispered. "For everything." He only nodded. But the moment was short. A technician ran in. "Your Majesty, you must see this." The war room glowed with fresh scans. Dozens of red dots lit up across the southern hemisphere. "They're retreating," Ravek said, surprised, "but not off the planet." "They're regrouping," Elias said, his tone serious. "This isn't over." New enemy signal appeared. This one was larger, stronger. An enormous Gorthan warship had landed on the surface. Deep in the ruins of an old Ixari city, they've brought in their ground commander, Ravek said. "General Kreiser." Elias narrowed his eyes. "I know that name. He led the invasion of 4 colonies. It's brutal, cold. Never leaves survivors." "He's here now," Virelia said, voice firm. "We finish this before he builds another base." "But we have no fleet," another officer said, "and our ground forces are scattered." Elias stepped forward. "Then we don't fight them. Head on. We draw them into a trap." He pointed to the old city ruins. "Gorthans rely on clean lines and strong signals. But in that city underground tunnels, ancient tech interference, broken Terranate's the worst place for them. Perfect for us." "You want to lure them there?" Relia asked. "Yes," Elias said. "We'll fake a retreat. Make them. I think we're falling back to the ruins. When they follow, we close the trap." The Queen nodded. "We'll need every fighter we have." That night, under the darkened sky, Ixari citizens prepared for the final battle. Drones flew overhead, carrying supplies. Old weapons were repaired. Signals were scrambled to confuse enemy scans. And scouts planted false trails leading toward the ruins. Elias moved between groups, helping with strategy, though he was tired. And injured, he didn't stop. The people had started to follow his lead not because of his title, but because he gave them hope. In one corner of the courtyard, Queen Virelia sat sharpening her blade. Her royal armor had been reforged stronger now. It's darker in color. Battle dash scarred, Elias approached and sat beside her. "You're fighting with us?" he asked. "I always fight with my people," she said. "I will not hide in my palace." He smiled slightly. "You're not what I expected from a queen." "And you're not what I expected from a human," she replied. For a moment, they sat in silence. Then Virelia asked, "Why do you really fight, Elias? This isn't your war." He looked up at the stars. "When I was young, my home was attacked. We begged for help. No one came. We were alone. I lost everyone I loved. Since then, I promised if I ever saw another world suffer like mine did, I wouldn't walk away." Virelia's voice softened. "You carry pain, don't we all?" He said quietly. She looked at him, then placed her hand over his. "Then let's make sure no more pain falls on this world." At dawn, the fake retreat began. Ixari ships, trucks, and even walking mechs moved visibly toward the old city ruins. Scout units left behind fake data trails. Broken com signals made it seem like a full fallback. Kreiser took the bait. Massive Gorthon war machines moved after them. Their elite forces marched straight into the ruins, expecting a weak, broken defense. Instead, we're walking into a battlefield crafted by Elias himself. Power cores were hidden in towers set to explode by remote. Ambush teams ready. Old Ixari robots, half repaired, acted as walking traps. And in the center of the ruins stood Elias and Virelia, waiting. The first wave of Gorthans struck hard but were met with fierce resistance. Elias directed the battle. From a makeshift command station, his voice came through every soldier's ear. "Collapse the East Bridge." Boom. Team 3 ambush at Tunnel Delta. He screams. He moved fast, thinking ahead, reacting to every Gorthan move. Virelia led the front line. He moved like a storm sword, glowing wings wide, rallying her warriors. The enemy began to break, but Krizer had one last move. Giant Machina, Fusion Tang, rumbled into the ruins. It fired beams that melted stone. It crushed everything in its path, and Krizer stood atop it, shouting, "Bring me the human." He wanted Elias dead. The tank stormed toward the command post. Elias looked around. "We can't hold him back." Then, his eyes landed on the old central tower full of unstable energy cores. "Virelia," he said through the cum, "I'm going to bring the tower down, but I need time." "I'll get you that time," she replied. She flew directly toward the tank, drawing Krizer's fire. Her armor cracked. Her wings were burned. But she didn't stop. Meanwhile, Elias climbed to the top of the tower and activated the cores. Power surged. The building began to shake. The tank aimed at him just as it fired. Virelia slammed into the side, throwing Krizer off balance. Elias pressed the final switch. Boom! The tower exploded, sending light and fire across the battlefield. The shockwave knocked down soldiers from both sides. The tank was destroyed. Krizer's forces scattered, and when the dust cleared, the Gorthons began to retreat. All across the city, cheers rose again. Ixer had survived. The sky burned red as hundreds of enemy drop pods fell through the clouds. They hit the ground like comets, smashing into buildings and roads around the capital city. Fires spread fast. Shock waves shook the palace walls. Inside the war room, Queen Virelia stared at the live map in front of her. Each glowing red dot was a Gorthon drop pod. There were far too many. "They're sending their elite forces," whispered Commander Ryvek. "Our ground troops can't hold against them." "These are shock troopers." Elias stood beside him, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the map. "They're not just here to fight," he said quietly. "They're here to end this." Queen Virelia turned toward Elias. "Then we must hit them before they're ready." "Tell us your plan, human." Elias nodded. "We use their speed against them." "These pods drop far apart, spread across the city. It means they'll be separated for the first few minutes." "That's our only window. You want to strike them while they're still landing?" asked another officer. "Exactly, Elias," replied. "Hit them fast and vanish. Make them think we're everywhere." Virelia frowned. "We don't have enough soldiers for that." Elias smiled slightly. "Then don't use soldiers. Use your people." Within the hour, the city tunnels and alleyways came to life. Civilians, engineers, scouts, and even retired guards joined. Small strike groups. Elias taught them how to set traps using damaged drones, unstable power cells, and abandoned construction gear. "They're not meant to fight," he explained, "just to scare and confuse." Queen Virelia personally gave orders to her people. Her voice was calm but strong. "We are not defeated, not while we still breathe. Trust the human. Trust each other." One group used energy cables to turn an old tower into an electric trap. A second team dropped part of a bridge onto 3 enemy pods. The third team sent false heat signals, leading Gorthon units into dead zones full of mines. The Gorthons expected direct battle. Instead, they walked into chaos. Commander Ryvak watched. "The reports come in. They're splitting up. They don't know where to strike. They're panicking." Elias nodded. "Good. That's just the start." While the defenders slowed the Gorthons on the ground, Elias turned his eyes to the sky. He walked with Virelia to the top of the palace again. From there, they could see the damage. Smoke rose everywhere. But even through the fire, some hope remained. "I need access to a launch pod," Elias said. Virelia looked surprised. "Why?" "I'm going up," he said, "to their orbit base." Virelia's eyes narrowed. "That's suicide." "You'll be outnumbered and alone, maybe," Elias said. "But their command center's up there. If I can destroy a Tor, even just confuse a Tit'll give you more time." Ryvek stepped forward. "Even if you reach it, how will you get inside?" Elias smirked. "I'm going to ride in one of their own pods." Everyone stared at him in silence. "You're insane," someone muttered. But Virelia wasn't smiling. She studied Elias carefully. "You've done this before, haven't you? Once, Elias said.
How long ago?
It almost killed me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. Take what you need. That night, Elias and 2 volunteers found a half-damaged drop pod in the West District. It had crashed awkwardly, but the inside controls still worked. Elias studied the layout quickly. It was old Gorthan tech, but he understood enough. He turned. To the volunteers, you don't have to come. One of them, a Rosari pilot named Rune, shook his head. You're not the only one with something to protect. The other, a quiet mechanic named Lyra, added, we lost too much already. We can stop this. We must. Together, they repaired the pod. Elias linked an overload device to the engine. If they couldn't break inside the Gorthan command ship, they'd blow the pod and take part of it with them. Hours later, the pod launched into the sky, hidden among the last wave of falling fire. Elias held tight as the small craft shook violently. His hands gripped the seat. His heart pounded. The stars came into view. There said Lyra, pointing. Gorthon Command Station. The massive ship hung above the planet like a black claw. Spikes of metal reached out into space. Gorthan ships floated nearby like sharks. The pod was pulled toward it by a docking beam. Alarms flashed. Red light. We've been spotted, said Rune. No choice now, Elias said. Brace yourselves. The pod slammed into the station. Soldiers waited outside, but they didn't expect what came next. Elias threw open the hatch and rolled a flash bomb. Exploded through the hallway. The human and his team jumped out, firing stun rounds and using smoke to cover their move. Inside the chaos, Elias found what he was looking for. The power core room. It was protected by 2 Gorthan guards, each twice his size. One swung a blade butt. Elias ducked and slid under it. He fired his shock blaster into the core, causing sparks to fly. The Gorthans charged again, but Rune tackled one, yelling now. Elias activated the overload device. Go, shouted to Lyra. Get back. To the pod. Go. Elias stared at the growing light in the core as alarms blared. The last thing he saw was fire, back on the surface. Queen Virelia stood in the palace war room. She had received no word from Elias. The last signal showed the pod reaching the enemy. Station, she closed her eyes. May the stars guide him. Suddenly, a shockwave hit the planet's orbit. An explosion bloomed across the sky. Pieces of the Gorthan command station fell toward the atmosphere, burning as they came. Did he? Revek whispered. Before Virelia could answer, a new report came in. The Gorthan ground troops are retreating. They've lost command. Orders, cheers filled the palace halls. People shouted, cried, hugged each other. After so many days of pain, they finally had hope. But the queen's smile faded when she looked up at the sky again. There was no sign of Elias. The sky above the capital of Ixur turned dark. Smoke rose from the shattered towers. Fire covered the roads. The once beautiful city, filled with shining buildings and floating lights, was now a battlefield. Alien soldiers ran through the streets, trying to hold the last line, but it was clear they were losing. In the center of the palace stood Queen Virelia, leader of the Exari Empire. Her armor, once bright silver, was scratched and burned. Her wings, large and violet like many royal. Exari were folded in pain. Her people were dying. Her army was broken. And the enemy, the Gorthans, were only minutes away from reaching the palace gates. Inside the Grand Hall, her advisors argued loudly. They've broken through Sector 9. We must activate the failsafe and destroy the palace better. To die with honor? No. We still have civilians in the tunnels. Virelia raised her hand. The room went silent. We do not die today, she said softly, but firmly. Not yet. The queen stepped out to the palace balcony. A crowd of wounded civilians, soldiers, and children stood below. Some cried. Others stared in silence. Their faces were full of fear. She looked at them all and spoke. I have not given up on you. Not until my last breath. Her voice echoed across the plaza. But deep down, even she knew the war was almost lost. And that's when a man stepped. Forward from the crowd. He didn't wear armor, wasn't tall like the Exari. His skin was light, his clothes dusty and plain. He had no weapons, just a steady walk and calm eyes. "Wait," said a guard. "Who is that? He's not one of us." Varelia narrowed her eyes. She had seen many species, but this one she recognized from old records. A human. The man walked, slowly, without fear. He stopped at the base of the steps and looked up at her. "You're planning to surrender?" he said, loud enough for all to hear. The guards pointed weapons at him. But Varelia held up her hand again. "I don't know who you are, human," she said, "but you don't understand our situation. We are surrounded." "I do understand," the man replied. "But surrender is not your only option." The queen frowned. "We have no more ships, no fleet, no heavy cannons. What do you suggest? We wait for a miracle?" The man gave a small smile. "Not a miracle, a strategy." There was silence. Finally she asked, "What is your name?" "Elias Rourke," he replied. "I'm from Earth. I was passing through on a trade ship when the war reached here. I watched your defenses fall. I watched how the Gorthons move. They fight like machines." "We've noticed," Varelia said bitterly. Elias took a deep breath. "I've seen wars like this before. On my planet. We didn't have laser fleets or gravity bombs, but we had other ways, unpredictable ways. If you let me help, I can buy you time." An older Exari officer shouted, "This is madness. He's a human. We don't even know his loyalty." Another joined, "He's a spy. A Gorthon plant." But the queen raised her voice. "I will decide." She stepped down the stairs and stood before Elias. "You say you've seen wars like this. Then answer me. What would you do if you were me?" Elias looked around at the people, then back into the queen's tired eyes. "I would hit them where they don't expect. Use the streets, shadows, panic, and one final strike, not to kill them all, but to shake their command. Without leadership, even machines fall apart." He spoke with such quiet certainty, even the doubting generals stopped talking. Queen Varelia stared at him for a long moment. Then she gave a single nod. "You'll get your chance." Within the hour, Elias stood in the palace war room. Maps and digital scans of the city glowed across the walls. Xari commanders explained the enemy positions. The Gorthons had surrounded the palace in a perfect circle. The next strike would be their final push. Elias pointed at the old water tunnels under the city. "Do the Gorthons know about these?" "No," a technician replied. "They're hundreds of years old, mostly unused." "Then that's where we'll begin," Elias said. He laid out a plan. "Send small mobile units through the tunnels. Strike the Gorthon supply drops from behind. Use misdirection. Set traps using leftover energy cores. And above all, don't engage in full battles. Strike and disappear. Keep them guessing. This isn't a war of strength anymore," Elias told them. "It's a war of minds. They think you're already beaten. That's your weapon." Queen listened closely. At first, many doubted him. But they had no better plan. Time was running out. That night, the first small unit, led by a young Ixari named Kale, followed Elias's instructions. They used the tunnel routes to sneak behind enemy lines and destroyed a Gorthon walker unit with one power trap. The next day, 2 more attacks hit Gorthon ammo dumps, and on the third night, they disabled an enemy communications tower using only a hacked energy beacon. The Gorthons began pulling back, confused, disorganized. Varelia watched it unfold with awe. She stood beside Elias on the palace roof. "You said you weren't here to lead," she said quietly. "I'm not," Elias replied. "I'm just not very good at watching good people die." For a moment, Varelia saw something deep in his eyes. Pain, loss, and something more. Purpose. "Why are you really here, Elias?" He gave a small laugh. "Maybe because I failed once before. My world was attacked long ago. I was just a scout then. I couldn't stop it. But maybe this time, I can help someone else win." Before she could speak, a message came through. "Your Majesty," a soldier cried. "The Gorthons are pulling back from the west gate." Cheers broke out across the palace. Hope returned. But just as the queen smiled, a deep sound rumbled through the air. Everyone froze. Ilias's eyes went wide. That sound? It's not ground artillery. He ran to the edge and looked up at the sky. Burning streaks of fire were falling from orbit. Drop-dash pods. Hundreds of them. The Gorthons are launching their elite squads, Commander said in horror. Elias whispered, "They're coming to finish." The queen turned to him. "What do we do now, human?" Elias clenched his fists. "We make them wish they never came down here."